you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. The Iron Lady things that makes official. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as the rest of the world. So there's lots of love. It's what can you do? It's a show about love, stories, lessons of life, the journeys of people that bring you the most amazing stories and cathartic events that they overcame. And they're here to help you make your life better, damn it, or else. I don't know what that means. And we have an amazing young lady on the show today. We're going to be talking about her hot new book that comes off the shelf June 3rd, 2025. It is called False Claims, One Insider's Impossible Battle Against Big Pharma Corruption, out June 3rd, 2025, by Lisa Prada. We're going to be talking to her about her insights on the book and some of her experience of life. She was a top-selling pharmaceutical and biotech sales representative for 32 years, helping pave the way for women in the field, only to see the entire industry corrode with sexual harassment and fraud. Lisa was an honors graduate of Albright College before launching her career at pharma giants such as AstraZeneca, Serrano, and Questcor. I can't pronounce that last. Questcor
Mallinckrodt.
There you go. I knew that.
It took me a while too.
That's quite the. Where are you from, Mallinckrodt? I think is that something that happens to watermelons?
I used to say when they said we were being bought out, I said that's too many consonants.
This isn't it.
We have to go back on Hooked on Phonics.
Yeah, no kidding. Just call it Bob. In 2012, while still employed at Questcor, she became a whistleblower reporting off-label prescriptions and Medicare fraud to the U.S. government and went undercover for nearly a decade. She's a single mother of two, including a special needs son. Welcome to the story, Lisa. Welcome to the show, Lisa. How are you?
Great, and thank you for having me, Chris.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. Give us any .coms. Where do you want people to find out more about you on the interwebs?
Well, there's several spots. My website, if you want to contact me, is lisapratt@yahoo.com. I'm on Truth Social, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn.
There you
go. The book can be ordered through, HarperCollins website, Amazon, or Barnes & Noble.
Mm-hmm. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your new book?
Well, 3/4 of the book has to do with the DOJ case and going undercover. But I think what's really critical is the first quarter of the book that kind of describes how I became that strong person with character, morals, and integrity. Mm-hmm. And mostly inner strength, because to go undercover takes a special kind of person. And it really goes back to the beginning where I had two horrific parents and experienced sexual, physical, and mental abuse. Mm-hmm. So in the 60s and 70s, there was nobody there to advocate for you. You were on your own. Mm-hmm. And it was a struggle to really survive. Mm-hmm. And fast forward, going into school, I kind of became an advocate for those that had no friends and those that were being bullied because I lived it at home. Mm-hmm. So the key to getting out of that environment was to go to college, because we were from a poor household. And I think after college, it was difficult because I had all these loans. But what really formulated my integrity and character was my Nona Rosidi, who had a farm. And I spent every summer working on her farm. And I think her personality and her teachings led me to living a moral, legal life in terms of doing what's right and doing things the right way. If it wasn't for her, I don't know where I would be.
Oh, wow. That's
And
interesting.
she was the first strong female and the only one that owned 3,000 acres in the state of New Jersey, starting in the 1930s. So she was an amazing role model.
Wow.
And she was the first one to say, you will be the first one to be arrested if you do anything wrong when you get out of college and when you go to school. And I never forgot that. She said, always, keep your nose clean, do things the right way.
The one thing people who go through childhood trauma seem to do is they react poorly to being gaslit or manipulated, or they try, excuse me, I think they try and overcompensate for, or compensate for a right and wrong. And they try and establish boundaries of what is right and what is wrong. And it sounds like you were taught that, even though your childhood experience was traumatic.
Well, yes. And back then there was no counseling.
Yeah.
No one listened to you. I was crying wolf in school.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, he was the head of the Knights of Columbus. Well, who's going to argue with that? But when the doors were closed, all hell broke loose.
Wow.
So if it wasn't for her, mentoring me, she knew what was going on, but there was nothing she could do or anybody could do.
Wow.
Because she was married to my father's father and she felt the same way about him. She made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So, my thoughts were, I am going to survive. I am going to be successful and I am going to have a good life, try to make money and help other people.
There you go.
Who were maybe in the same situation that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was a journey in terms of, I always was friends with the child who was bullied.
Mm-hmm.
I always took the loner who had no friends and I stood up for those who had no voice. So fast forward, getting out of college and getting into pharma sales, and I saw all that sexual harassment. And I'm thinking, well, I have a lot of experience in terms of how to fight those situations. But what blew me away, because, I was like, oh, this is going to be like Leave It to Beaver, the white picket fence. Even though I was the first woman hired, everybody does things legal, ethically, moral. We're all professionals no matter what sex you were. Well, that was untrue. I saw the fraud. I saw the kickbacks. I started to see bribes. And all I could hear is my grandmother and my nonna saying, you're the first one that's going to be locked up if you do anything illegal. Her analogy was, you steal a piece of bubble gum, you're going to get arrested, when I was little.
Wow.
So I knew that I had to do things the right way and also try to fight back.
So
and not be a follower, but be a leader.
And so you joined the pharmaceutical companies out of college.
Correct.
And so what time period is this in?
Well, this was my third job.
Okay.
Because they would not hire a woman right out of college. I tried to get into pharmaceutical sales, but they basically told me, we only hire men. So I had a friend. See, back then your health insurance only lasted 6 months on your parents. So I had to find a job because I had to get health insurance. It wasn't until the age of 26. So what happened is I had a friend whose father was a burn surgeon in Philadelphia. And he said, there's this National Diabetes Research Interchange that needs a tissue procurement coordinator,
Mhm.
AKA I did autopsies
Oh.
for a year. I
Mhm.
procured tissue, like transplant or autopsy tissue for diabetes research.
Mhm.
But it carried science experience and I had health insurance.
Yeah.
And then after that, I still tried to apply for a pharma position. And back then, there was no, online, there were no computers. So I
Yeah.
saw an advertisement in the paper that said United Healthcare is recruiting
Mhm.
physician coordinators. And I said, aha, that's kind of like pharma experience because I'm getting doctors to join this managed care program. And I got hired.
Oh.
Hence, I had 2 years of experience of managed care.
Oh.
So in 85 is when I got hired as a pharma rep.
Uh-huh. And that was the first job?
You mean
You
it
said
was my third job at first pharmaceutical job?
yeah. Okay,
Yes.
so third job, first pharmaceutical. Okay.
Yes.
There you go. So how does that experience turn out? When did things start going off the rails?
Well, I mean, the misogyny and the sexism
Mhm.
was immediate, but I
Mhm.
had a phenomenal first manager and mentor who protected me as a
Mhm.
woman. And he says, you stay with me, I'm protecting you. But about a year later, I was in a doctor's office and I ran into a serial rep who sold cardiovascular medicine. And he said, yeah, we're taking the doctors to Bimini to go snorkeling and scuba diving.
Wow.
And I was speechless. And I called my manager on a payphone because there were no cell phones. And I said, did you hear about this? And that's how, the trips and all started
Mhm.
with one company.
So tell me what this is the experience of you is in this. There's a is this the first time you hear about this and you start going, I don't know, my grandmother raised me, not to do anything illegal. This sounds kind of unethical and questionable.
Well, my eyes were like saucers
Mm-hmm.
until my company, which was Carter Wallace, starting getting these ideas of Dr. Lunches, Dine and Dash. It just exploded. And my line was, I don't feel comfortable doing this.
Mm-hmm.
If I said I won't do it, it's considered insubordination. And
Mm-hmm.
HR, who is not your friend, would get rid of you.
Yeah.
So many times that line in my pharmaceutical career held. There were a few times where they let me go.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, because to them, that was insubordination.
Okay. And then when do you reach the point where you decide to turn state's evidence or technically federal evidence?
Well, basically, a colleague of mine, his name is Pete in the book, he was fired and he called me and said, hey, you're still working for QuestCorps. I need you to come in
Mm-hmm.
because you could provide a lot more evidence working for the case. So, of course, I was divorced. I had a special needs son.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of debt from the divorce and I needed to work. So I never make a decision right away.
Uh-huh.
So I said, give me a week maximum. I have to think about it. And that week I had a patient program, which is where QuestCorps and other companies have physicians or nurses talk to the patients about a drug. Usually it's off label and the patients go back to their doctor and demand the drug. And I had this patient program and it was for multiple sclerosis patients. I was going to the bathroom and this woman, her name is Melanie, was about 32 years old. She followed me and she had a cane.
Mm.
And before I got in the bathroom, she said, Lisa, is Acthar going to help me? And I also learned she was diagnosed with lymphoma.
Oh, wow.
She said, is this drug going to make me better? And as a sales rep, only the physician can answer that question.
Yeah.
So I told her, yeah, the corporate line, you have to ask, the doctor who's giving the talk or your family neurologist. I went in the bathroom. I lost it. I broke down.
Wow.
And it took me a while to get my act together to come back. And after that dinner, I called Pete and I said, I'm in. Who's going to fight for these patients? Because Questcor was dosing the drug at a suboptimal dose, and the patients who had an attack never got better. They were getting worse.
They were getting worse.
Yes.
And did you ever brought that up to the management or said, hey, this doesn't seem to be working, or is it just obvious that they weren't going to care?
They were all in on, I call it the Amway train. I noticed it training. I'm like, wait a second. The patients, when they have an attack, are treated with Acthar, and they have to be on it 3 or 4 weeks, not 5 days. Well, Medicare wasn't going to pay for it unless they compared it to a steroid, which was used for 3 to 4 days. So when I first heard that in training, I went, what did I do taking this job?
Yeah.
So I was friends with private investigators, cops, etc., lawyers. And they said, I discussed it with friends. They said, you have to sell by the package insert, which I always did. And I would say to my manager, my line, I don't feel comfortable selling off label.
Oh, wow.
I don't. And I told them I don't look good in orange if I go to jail. And the food's terrible. But this, I was in shock. Because this was the worst. These people, if with an MS patient, if you have an attack, the key is to treat that attack and get them back to baseline.
Yeah.
So they don't progress in their disease. With this drug, they felt better, but they never got back to baseline. And I would see these people come back to these patient programs. First, they were walking. Then they came in with a cane. Then they went to a wheelchair. So I knew they were progressing in their disease and had taken Acthar subtherapeutically.
Wow.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
So,
and you have a special needs son. How does this shape? Tell us about that and how that shaped your perspective and what you decided to do ultimately.
Well, at about 8 weeks, my son started having febrile seizures that were 30 minutes long. And some of them, they required helicopter visits to formerly AI DuPont is where we started. And, back then, nobody really knew how to diagnose autism. He's 27 now. So I basically was the advocate in order to find a diagnosis, in order to find treatment, and also education. And it brought me to my knees. I mean, because there wasn't a diagnosis, but eventually we found Dr. Weller, who was at University of Pennsylvania, who finally, he's a fusion of diagnosis, not just autism. He's oppositional defiant. So that was hard. And he has explosive personality. So you really had to watch yourself at home because it could be dangerous. And with Dr. Weller was the path to getting him a diagnosis and under control. But that, advocating him to go to a special school could take its toll, but I had to. He was my son. So when the opportunity came to be a whistleblower, I've been there for ultimate stress. I knew being a whistleblower, this isn't over in 6 months. So, having been abused, having advocated for those that don't have a voice, and the piece de resistance is my son,
Mhm.
I was ready.
Yeah.
I was more than ready, because these MS patients I equated to my son. They
Yeah.
had no voice. He
Mhm.
was getting better. They were getting worse.
Mhm.
So when Pete, my colleague who got fired, asked me, it was an easy choice. It was a gift
Mhm.
to be able to do this.
Definitely. I can see how that would influence you as the mother of a son,
Ugh,
and having to advocate and see what their struggle was, and yeah. So I mean, did you struggle with it? Because I'm interested in the human element of this. Did you struggle with? I mean, going on the witness program with the feds. I don't know if you were officially on the witness program or
no.
what your status was, but doing that, turning state's evidence or federal evidence, uh, that's a big decision, right? I mean, how did you
Yeah.
broach that?
Well, I said, who is going to speak for these people? All the companies I work for were corrupt. Nobody spoke for me. Who is going to help them? Somebody has to. And I said, I'm going to roll the dice like playing craps. I have to do it. I knew that I would be Jane Doe for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll deal with going public later. I didn't think about that.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to disassociate my emotions and think of it as a third job.
Wow.
And I just said, I'm going to be relentless and bring Questcore down.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to their knees for what they've done.
Good. I mean, you do
So,
stuff illegal, you got that coming. But it's interesting, like I said, how children of trauma tend to become bully of bullies, or they defend other people, or they see other people being victimized through their eyes, and they know what that's like, and they decide that they're going to stop that. It's kind of a way of trying to repair what was done to you, in a way.
I think
And
so.
yeah, and so right and wrong becomes more important. If people gaslight you, it tends to trigger people in trauma, because they were gaslight. It basically just reenacts their trauma. And the reason I talk about this is we discuss this a lot on the show about trauma and different issues people have, and how much their childhood shapes their arc through life. But so you turn state's evidence, or I keep saying state's evidence, technically federal evidence. And what is that experience like? I mean, are you wearing wires? Is it nervous?
I volunteered. No, I wasn't nervous because, in my opinion, I never had people say that you have done great or a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my two key TAM attorneys that I am going to be the DOJ's best relator.
Mm.
I am moldable. I follow advice, which I did. Even as an employee, I was like Gumby. I can, I'm alpha, but I can listen and take criticism. And I listened to my two attorneys because I knew they were the experts.
Oh yeah.
So I looked at it as a job, and I there were thousands and thousands of pages of evidence that I faxed, notes I wrote on my pants at meetings.
Wow.
I ruined pants by writing notes. So I wrote them on cocktail napkins. I wrote things like in school,
Mhm.
underneath your palm in grade school, you write a note, show somebody. But the DOJ said, we have so much evidence. I volunteered to be
Wow.
wired. They said, we've got a plethora of evidence.
Wow.
I volunteered.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to do everything in my power. And one of the things they told me is, you have to really, this is, a marathon
Mm-hmm.
and it could go a long time, and they were correct. You just have to stay focused
Mm-hmm.
and not let your head make you go crazy, because
Yeah.
a lot of whistleblowers that they had wound up being hospitalized
Oh, really? For
and having
stress?
mental breakdowns. Yes.
Oh, I can see that. I mean, it's stressful. I mean, you watch movies where people wear a wire and they dramatize it. Especially with the mob, I would be worried. If somebody finds out, they don't want their money mucked up.
Yeah.
They may decide for violence, and there's a risk there.
Well, when I became public, it was a different story.
Yeah,
I was getting drive-bys, hang-ups.
really,
I got Rottweilers.
really.
And I said, look, can they help me? No. But if you die, the government can get 3 times the amount of money. So I was like, no,
Jesus,
I'm on
wow.
my own. I even asked my local cops to do patrol, and they thought it was a joke.
Wow.
To do, like, I'm a single parent. So I
Mhm.
started collecting Rottweilers.
Wow. So
Yeah.
when you went public, or the courts went public with it, what was the first step out that the public became aware of your or the people you were turning in became aware of what you were doing?
Oh, I was getting doctors trying to call. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, my phone was blowing up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was getting drive-bys. Stop, look at my house, and it wasn't for sale.
Wow. Yeah.
So I called my key tam attorneys and I said, talk to the DOJ. I'm all by myself here. And they
Mhm.
said, we don't protect people.
Wow.
And
Even though
I'm
you're
like,
a witness?
no.
Wow. That
But
is
if you
crazy.
die, we'll get 3
But
times the amount.
we actually want you to die so it will help our
Yeah.
case. Wow.
So, I said, well, being a child, an abused child and all, I'm on my own.
Yeah. You're kind of used to defending yourself. Yeah.
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 So I got Rottweilers.
There you go. That'll do it. And so you go through that experience. How long did you have to have that sort of terrifying experience of people harassing you or trying to intimidate you?
It lasted a couple years.
Really? Years?
Yes. It lasted
Wow.
a couple years and it stopped. But when this book comes out, it's going to start up again, because the
Oh.
book discusses healthcare and general, not just Questcor, but companies in general
Mm-hmm.
and doctors.
Wow.
So, but you know what? I'll deal with it when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think about it.
There you go. Well, it's a whole lot harder to probably stop you at this point because now it's a book.
Yeah.
What happened with the case? Tell us about the case. What happened with the case on this?
Well, what happened is in 2019, when I became public, the Mallinckrodt had bought Questcor. They only settled 10% of the case.
Mm.
And I said to my key tam attorney, something stinks,
Mm-hmm.
because of all the cases that I've read that were taken by a civil division, there's 100% settlement.
So this is a civil
So,
case, not criminal?
yes, they were going to go criminal, but I've discovered basically with the Department of Justice, it was just too much,
Wow.
time and money in order to do a criminal case and go to
You put your
trial.
life on the line for this. I mean,
Yeah, well, what can you do?
Yeah, I guess.
But they decided to go civil, and what they did is I provided so much evidence, they take the low-hanging fruit
Mhm.
in order to prosecute. The
Yeah.
easiest infractions are bribes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they did. But Mallinckrodt only settled 10% of the case. So the thing is we're going to prepare for trial.
Oh, wow.
So I was practicing depositions. I had to meet with the DOJ, and the head from Augie Ripa came from Washington to grill me for about 6 hours to see how he would do as a witness, federal witness on the stand.
Uh-huh.
So,
Wow. That's quite,
yeah, that was
quite
interesting.
And so then you finally got to meet on the witness stand and turn in these folks and stuff. What was that
Yeah.
experience like?
Well, we didn't go to trial.
Oh,
We almost were,
Mhm.
but then all of a sudden, Malincrot hit the news and they were involved in the opioid crisis, the other
wow.
division. And I told my attorneys they're going to claim bankruptcy.
Mm.
And they are sweet talking the government. This was my opinion. And we're not going to go to trial. They're just going to be like that bad boyfriend who doesn't want to keep going on dates and, oh, we'll go next week. And that's what they were doing. And 14 months later, Malincrot went bankrupt.
Wow. So they just bankrupt their way out of the civil case?
Yes, everything.
Wow.
But the opioids did them in.
Yeah.
And that's why they only settled 10% of the case, because they knew that they were going to get sued due to they were the third worst opioid offender on the opioid end.
Mm-hmm.
So
wow. This is crazy.
I told them, huh?
Yeah, it's crazy. A lot of stuff that comes out there.
But you know what? Justice was served in a way. It brought them down to their knees.
Yeah.
They've recovered. Acthar is now $45,000 a vial.
Wow.
So, yeah.
$45,000 a vial. Holy crap.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
And a patient needs 5.
Oh, no. That is just insane. Just totally insane.
And it was made from a pig pituitary from a slaughterhouse.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's crazy.
So that's one thing we learned in training. I said, so pretty much they got it for free.
Wow. That is crazy. So one of the things you talk about in your book is you need to advocate for themselves. What are some different ways that you advise people to advocate for themselves in medicine and in the health business?
Well, there is one website that, basically in 2010, there was this law. It was a physician transparency law where doctors had to, it was for the Medicare, disclose if they got any money for talks, if they were involved in studies, or if they got lunches. And of course it wasn't publicized, but the website people can go on before they go see a doctor is openpaymentsdata.cms.com and type in your doctor and you can see if they're on the take.
Wow. You can do that yourself thing. Now that's open payments data.
Yeah.
Okay.
DATA.CMS, which is Medicare, .gov, G-O-V.
Wow.
Type in your doctor. And I would suggest doing it before you see your doctor. My theory is a patient should know the answers before they ask those questions to see if their physician is on the take or lying. I also suggest that they go to legal websites like Law 360 or Justica to see if they've been named in a lawsuit.
Ah, that's pretty interesting.
Yes. I also suggest that if they're prescribed a drug, to ask the doctor, do you talk for this medication? If they do, run, because they're not making a decision based on science or publications in journals. They getting paid by the company $3,000 per talk.
That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. And so you can check these things and advocate for yourself.
Yes. You can also check the company. And you can go in, the company has these SEC filings where you can see if they're being sued. They're like 120 some pages, but I read them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the 8K, which is quarterly, and the 10K. And you can go down and see if they've been, because they have to disclose it, and it's in tiny print, if they've been named or involved in a Ketam case.
Mm-hmm.
So these questions before you can even take a drug or go see your doctor.
That's important. Like, doctors should be like NASCAR racers, where they have to put all the emblems on themselves. Politicians too.
Yeah.
They have to put the emblems of all their sponsors that gave them money. But this is great that there's a resource for this. I didn't even know these websites existed.
Yeah. I always like to see if they've been named in a lawsuit, and you can't find it in Google.
Really?
And and there's another website, legal website, that's free. It's called Kroll with a K, KROLL.com.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some specialists that I've had to see light up.
Wow.
So I canceled the appointment. Like when I had cancer.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of them didn't have my best interest because they were named in a lawsuit.
Oh, they were named in a lawsuit. Oh,
Yes.
There you go.
Or malpractice.
Is really, that's really powerful to know this data. One thing, my mom raised 2 handicapped daughters, and she finds that she gets more advocacy and help from the prescription the prescription doctors than she does the real doctors. She trusts her pharmacist more. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I don't trust the pharmacist, and it has to do.
You don't trust anybody.
No, I don't.
Or at least so.
I have a whole theory about generic drugs, and it's not good. Because, this was a Band-Aid for the government. Oh, we're going to have generic drugs. And the key of the pharmacy is to slam your drug to a generic. Well, a generic drug is not 100% the same thing. It's 80% or 125% plus or minus. Mm-hmm. So that could be dyes, fillers. Wow. It has to be almost there. Mm-hmm. So the key of the pharmacist is to give you the generic drug because they're getting benefits from corporate. They have to show they dispense so many generic drugs versus brand. Everybody's on the take together.
Wow.
So the only generic drugs I would take would be like a generic antihistamine. Mm-hmm. I would not ever take any generic drug if you had like cancer, cardiovascular issues, diabetes.
Wow.
Never.
So do you think there's more markups in the genetics, and there's more availability for patients?
Oh, the markup of a generic drug's like 3,000%. Profit margin is extensive.
Wow.
See, and I used to do contracting too, and work with wholesalers in the 80s and 90s.
That's wild.
So, and we used to call on pharmacies at the time, so I knew what the markup was.
Yeah. A few years ago, we had Catherine Ebon on the show. I don't know if you've heard of her. She wrote a book called Bottle of Lies, The Inside Story of the Generic Drug Boom. And she talks about, these generics being made in other countries that, are questionable on, how clean they are, how well they've processed, adding stuff that shouldn't be added. It was kind of interesting discussion.
Well, the FDA allows this.
Wow.
This was the FDA law, plus or minus like 25%. So it goes 80 to 125. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to take and roll the dice if I have heart issues. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't work, I could wind up like, say, I had AFib in the ER. Mm-hmm. There's no way. There is a way, too, even though things are expensive, that you can get a brand name. Mm-hmm. And I demand a prior authorization. Mm-hmm. I demand they do it on the phone. Not demand, but I ask nicely.
Okay.
I say, because the doctor won't do it. They allow substitution. Whoa. You have to have them write brand name necessary. And usually, like I have Cigna now, they're bad. I get every prior auth approved because I have the doctor either call in or write it.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So you can get approved for a brand name drug. It's just the doctors don't want to do the work. So you ask them nicely, I want a prior authorization. Insurance companies hate that word.
Oh.
But you can get the brand name, I would say 85% of the time. And also, you can get copay assistance from the company that makes the brand name.
Oh, really?
So if you have a high, say you want a brand name, like, I'm just trying to think, Lipitor to lower your cholesterol. And your copay, you got approved for it, but it's a different level. It's a high copay. Say your copay is $500. Well, the company has coupons. Usually you have to ask.
Really?
Or you could contact the company, has usually a patient assistance program. So they'll take care of your copay.
Okay. Wow.
Which most people don't know.
Wow, that's pretty helpful.
Yeah.
So there you go. So as people read your book and stuff, what do you want people to come away with? What's important for you as they walk away from reading the book? What lessons they learn or information they gather?
I just want people to be enraged because to me, healthcare in general and the pharma industry is completely broken. And if people are enraged and demand change to their local congressman or senator, this is the only way our system is going to be corrected. And I also want them to see that you can be an advocate because the only one that's going to help you is you. Nobody cares about you. Don't assume your doctor cares. They don't care. Managed care has destroyed this in physicians. Wow. So all those little tips and homework have to demand what you want and take notes. And if you don't like it, find another doctor. So be your own advocate. Don't assume they're God and put them on a pedestal.
It's interesting that we kind of assume that these folks have our best interests at heart, but like you say, they're highly compromised. And I think people are kind of discovering that. We want to believe that someone who's a caretaker who follows ethical rules or supposed to be ethical rules about living and dying, would be a purveyor of high ethics and standards. But money's money, and
I think too the ethics part and the corruption, but I think with the rise of managed care, it cut most of their salaries in half.
Oh wow,
and more because you're limited what they get for a Medicare patient or a commercial patient. That's it. So that means what they were used to 12 years ago has been cut in half. Hence, the pharma companies come in with all the bribes and kickbacks.
Wow.
So they used to care years ago. Nobody cares.
Wow. Well, it does seem like we have a real problem in this country with our health care and all that good stuff. So give people your final pitch out as we go out to order the book, .coms to find and learn more about you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, basically Lisa Prada, yahoo.com. You can find the book on Amazon, your usual places, Barnes & Noble. The publisher is HarperCollins. They have a website. I mean, if you type in Lisa Prada, false claims pages come up in smaller bookstores to order.
There you go. Well, thank you very much, Lisa, for coming on and telling your story. Amazing story, and definitely, a great advice for people. We all reach a point sometime where we're spending a lot of time with medicines and doctors and stuff. And we need more advocates for ourselves and And we need to call out this industry to behave itself better, ethically and morally. So thank you very much, Lisa, for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris.
Thank you. And thanks to our audience for tuning in. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. False Claims: One Insider's Impossible Battle Against Big Pharma Corruption. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.